Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode 59 of Go Fund Yourself. JD Gagnon here, and this is Christine, again, from Tashi Finance. How you doing, Christine?
Very well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, so just context for anybody watching. Christine was not aware that she was going to be on Go Fund Yourself until literally 10 minutes ago. We asked her to join. Kiara had to step out for a family reason unexpectedly. So here we are. So Christine has very little context on what we're talking about today. So I'll tee up the items and then we'll go from there. What we're talking about today, we're going to talk a little bit about South Africa and kind of their opinions, I guess, on a BRICS common currency, what that looks like. We'll talk a little bit about Canada again. Canada talking about their digital dollar, CBDC. We talked about this a little bit before. Michael Saylor has some opinions on CBDCs, as you can imagine. We'll talk about a few other kind of regulatory things, some stuff out of Estonia, a few things about African countries and using stablecoins as opposed to Bitcoin with respect to Bitcoin congestion and other things. Proposed SEC custody rules. Man, we got tons of stuff to talk about today.
We got 20 minutes.
And we are going to just jump right in. All right, we are back. It's episode 59. So apparently I sing a song every 30 episodes, according to Kiara. I did it yesterday, so you missed it, Christine.
What is the song?
Well, I can't do it again today, but you know the happy dog. Anyways, yeah, see? So anyways, we did that yesterday. It was awesome. I'm assuming everybody was excited to see it, so maybe we'll do it again in 30 more episodes. Just a quick shout out to our friends at Dragonfly. We're a portfolio company of Dragonfly. Haseeb, Tom, and crew are incredible stewards of the space and good friends. And so I'm repping their merch today. It's one of my favorite shirts. Super soft. It's almost like it's made out of cashmere or something. I don't know. It's like soft and cozy, and it just makes me want to touch it. Anyways, Christine, looks like you're repping.
I am repping the I had no idea that this was happening look. But the idea is like always take care of yourself. Do the things, wear the clothes, go to the gym, do whatever it is you need to do. Mindset matters.
You are sponsored by The Rock.
One day I'll be sponsored by The Rock, 100%. Maybe after this video. Yep.
Maybe we'll tag The Rock and this will be your coming out party. All right. So we talked about a whole lot of stuff this week, obviously with respect. We did a little bit of DeFi discussion yesterday. But first we're going to talk, I think, today about just South Africa and kind of their opinion on the BRICS common currency. So South Africa, although there's some speculation that that they're really a proponent of this, I think they're kind of saying, whoa. Instead of just rushing into replacing the US dollar as having its hegemony over global trade, that maybe we should just hold on for a second and let's take a look at what how this might impact kind of second and third order impacts of the global financial ecosystem. What are your thoughts on that, Christine? Any thoughts on
this? Incredibly smart, and I'm super glad that somebody stepped up to say it, because it all sounds like fun and games when you can just run in and create your own currency. But I mean, you have to look at everything as a whole. It's the same way that when you go to apply sanctions to somebody, you're trying to target your specific person, but everybody's impacted, right? Yeah. The little guys are impacted. So I think it means everything to have to step back and consider, what are we actually doing here? What are the long-term impacts of this? Because at the end of the day, it's really easy for the big players to win. And that almost in every circumstance means that the little people lose, right? It's got to come from somewhere. So,
yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. I mean, it sounds romantic to, if you're not the US, it sounds great to dethrone the US, right? Because there's global economic competition, of course, which is healthy. But everybody seems inclined to dethrone the US. And this seems like a way to take a pretty big dent out of the US global control. obviously. But I think to your point, what's important here is kind of the downstream impacts to a lot of smaller institutions, intermediaries, smaller countries. Kind of like, are we actually doing ourselves a massive global disservice by shaking up the status quo? As South Africa is saying, we don't know, but what we do need is some thoughtful, careful debate before we rush into a solution.
Yeah, and the answer might be yes, or it might be no, or it might be somewhere in the middle. Generally, it's somewhere in the middle. Like it's just, it can't be forgotten about. It can't be overlooked. Like you said, in the name of romance, you know, in this overtaking, that's not how the global economy works. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
As much as we hate each other, we need each other.
So all of the articles, all of these come from news articles. Obviously, they're all posted under the video for anybody that wants to check out the source articles. We're going to show a little bit of a contrast here between Canada's approach and perception and the US approach to CBDCs. So first, we'll start with Canada. We talked about this, I think, yesterday and a little bit last week about some of the, kind of movements from a regulatory perspective in Canada, but now specifically that Canada is one of the first countries coming out and saying, hey, like we're really pushing towards a CBDC. I've obviously, and yourself, I think on the stream we did a couple of days ago, we have unique ties to Canada, of course, and unique experiences and understanding with Canada's overreach in some ways on censorship and control. So on one hand, what Canada is saying in these articles, or what they're discussing in the articles relative to Canada, is they're saying, oh, it's going to promote financial inclusion and blockchain innovation is going to be like a big thing. Everybody's all excited. What I hear is, look at this exciting part and ignore all the other stuff that we're going to, all the changes to your data sovereignty and your banking independence, financial independence from the government. Being Canadian yourself, Christine, do you think this is a slippery slope?
Of course it's a slippery slope. Yeah. I mean, if it was like, if you could say with an honest heart, my government does the best for me. They always put they always take into account all the information and do the best thing for the people. And I understand that different countries work in different ways and that works for them. And that's totally fine. There are some nations that are completely supported by their governments. They pay astronomical taxes, but they get something in return for that. And the majority of the people are happy about it. But in my opinion, having lived in Canada, it doesn't feel like that. Like that, it never feels like it's really for the good of the people. It always feels like it's for the good of the government. And so, right. I mean, I believe there's probably a situation where with CBDCs that might make sense so that more people have access to banking, to whatever, I don't know. But I mean, in Canada, I feel
is financial inclusion a concern in Canada currently?
I don't believe it is. I don't see a reason why it should be. Whether people choose to take the steps or not, depending on what their own beliefs are, that's on them. But there doesn't seem to be a reason why there would be. But I think it's really important that we look back and say, what is the history here? What has the government said that they're doing for us? And in hindsight, we're like, maybe that really wasn't for us. Maybe that was for you, and taking that into account, I believe that this really nice, we talked about this in the last episode where they're like, oh, we're going to put out a survey and see what it is you want from us. And it's like a really nice way in. And then like 5 days later, they're like, it's coming, we're coming,
So we're gonna move on to the contrast here, which is America. And here in the US, people are naturally a little bit more skeptical, I think, of government overreach and government control. And so Michael Saylor, this is worth taking with a grain of salt. So read the article. Michael Saylor has a very maximalist perspective on Bitcoin, of course. MicroStrategy is the largest, or if not one of the largest holders of Bitcoin. And he is unapologetic about his commitment to Bitcoin being the only crypto digital currency that matters and will matter. So anyways, take this with a little bit of a grain of salt. But we were talking a little bit about this yesterday. And in contrast to Canada, just because the government says, hey, we want you to use this CBDC now instead of fiat currency so we can still have all the monetary control, monetary policy, fiscal policy control that we've always had, But now we're going to do it via a digital blockchain enabled currency. What Michael Saylor is saying, and I actually tend to agree with this, that it's going to push people to some other asset class if they are skeptical of government overreach. And in his opinion, it's going to be Bitcoin. I think there's probably a few potential solutions beyond Bitcoin, but there's a lot of arguments for why Bitcoin may be that. What are your thoughts? Like, if this did come in the US, Christine, would you use an American CBDC? Or do you think you would try to, even if it's a little bit more friction, would you try to use Bitcoin or some other asset in lieu of that?
Well, to be fair, I'm already using Bitcoin and some other asset. So,
right.
I mean,
but you still use US dollars, no?
Of course I do. I still use US dollars where you have to. And I mean, this is, I guess, how much do you want to put yourself out? But there are certain instances where you can't. You like transactionally use any sort of crypto, DeFi, whatever. But I mean, I do where I can. There's places I like to shop with it and do whatever. And I think it just is about, as it gets more normalized, like you said, it's going to push people into, but we talked about this 5 days ago. I said, by the government saying, hey, we're going to do this, it just opens it up to being more normal. And the jump is less far for people to get into this. So I agree.
I think part of this comes down to.
But wait, let me back up 1 second and say that I don't think that it's going to be a one or the other. I think for a functioning country and society, there will be both. Like we can't say completely wash. We're not using currency of the country ever. That's it. Like that's not going to happen. There's going to be a blend. So.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of this depends on vendors and retailers and different people starting to adopt.
Yeah.
I mean, what I think will end up happening is as soon as they have to have the infrastructure to deal with CBDCs, that same infrastructure, not quite, but similar infrastructure is used for Bitcoin and other assets to be a currency of exchange. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we might just naturally see a lot more proliferation. Right now, it's a challenge. You can pay for many things with Bitcoin, but you have to try really hard. I know a few people that their entire life is paid for with digital currencies. Everything they do, they will not do it unless you can pay with crypto. That is a pretty onerous process.
Those are the people that are forging the way for us right now. So props to those people.
Yeah, no kidding. So good for them. Hopefully we're going to see, an explosion really of retailer adoption in terms of, adding these as payment options. And then hopefully it gives people some flexibility. All right. Enough for now, I think, on CBDCs, because we beat up on this every month. I think, or every month, almost every day, every week we have a CBDC section at the very least. I think what I glean from all of this, kind of in conclusion, is they're coming. I mean, this is something that major jurisdictions globally are seriously looking at as being an alternative to fiat currencies for a whole host of reasons. And to me, it's picking up steam. It's not losing steam. It's more and more countries. We're hearing more and more about this. There's another article that we'll probably link, but we're not going to talk about, with respect to Brazilian farmers, and they're starting to make these niche cases for why this is so important. Anyways, something else that's kind of interesting is unstoppable finance. So there's an article. It's really worth the read if you want to check it out. But Unstoppable Finance launched the first DeFi native bank in Europe, which is pretty interesting in the wake of, I don't want to call it debanking, but challenges with regional banks in the US. Europe has also not been immune to challenges with a lot of these regional banks, which traditionally were where crypto businesses had to go to get banking services, because the large institutions were just like, oh, you touch crypto, I'm out. And now it's becoming increasingly more difficult, if not impossible, to get new banking relationships for blockchain companies and crypto companies. So I'm not super familiar with Unstoppable Finance, but this to me seems interesting. It's a DeFi native bank. It should be fully regulated, but in a on-chain decentralized fashion, which is interesting. I believe this is trying to also appeal to MICA, which is the kind of regulatory framework the EU is working on. Any thoughts on this? Is this exciting? Is it, meh? What do you think?
It's not meh, that's for sure. I have a whole bunch of thoughts on this, but what it comes down to is we're seeing two worlds colliding right now. We have the government coming in and saying, we're going to create these CBDCs. We also have our government coming in and saying, you can't do it in DeFi. And then we have these players on the other side of the world who are able to do these things, like open DeFi native banks. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of going to be like a race to the end here where we're getting so much back. Yep.
Chiara would be really happy because it's the crypto arms race. That's what she always calls it.
Arms race.
Right, exactly.
No, but it really is, where it's like all of the people in play right now know how huge this is. And so it's about who is going to be able to get away with doing it. And I don't want to say first, because it's not going to be like the government or the people, because the governments will get there and the people will get there, but where access will be allowed is where it's going to flourish. And we need to focus wherever that is, right?
I mean, in traditional finance, the US generally has been the regulatory head of the snake, so to speak, in the sense that whatever happens out of the US, most global jurisdictions follow some version of it. Yeah. What we're potentially risking by the US dragging their feet as they have, and I've been a fairly outspoken opponent to their lack of speed here. But what's interesting here is that it seems like a lot of the policy is going to be led, if a lot of this stuff continues to expand in all of these jurisdictions, the US will not be the leading jurisdiction for regulation. And that has potentially some negative impacts for people in the US and access to the liquidity that the US provides on a financial scale, which is huge generally for any financial market. And the reason for that is if all of these rules and regulations exist at scale, and then the US comes out with different rules and regulations, then the decisions on the behalf of protocols is, hey, here's a favorable global sans US structure that you can follow, or you got to follow two structures, one that's global and then a completely different one, fairly onerous in the US, which is what it seems like might happen. That's definitely not good for US participants. So something to watch closely. I'm a little fuddy on this. Kara was giving me a hard time yesterday because I was Captain FUD apparently yesterday. Not sure why. But I was a little bit fuddy. Anyways, meanwhile, while this exciting stuff is happening in Europe, Estonia has changed their AML regulations and CTF regulations, in essence, increasing regulation in general. And 400 crypto firms have had to cease operations in Estonia. Now, the reason that we're bringing this one up, in my opinion, is this headline is a little bit fuddy. So what actually happened is they've come out now with AML regulation, which is going to be standard, obviously anti-money laundering regulation globally, in my opinion. They've come out with regulation, which has then rendered a lot of these platforms that incorporated and operated out of Estonia, because of their lack of regulation, it has now meant that there's regulation, these people are not in compliance. Their choice is leave Estonia or come into compliance. And this headline is, to me, is a little bit funny. It's not like they pushed out on purpose 400 firms. They implemented regulation, which has, as a byproduct, made it so that these firms have to make a decision. I suspect this is what's going to happen everywhere. This is going to happen in every country. When regulation comes in, businesses have to make a decision. Can I adhere to these compliance requirements or not? And am I interested in doing that or not? And that's a decision that each platform, each business is going to have to make. Had you heard of Estonia being a hotbed for crypto prior to this article today?
Me? No.
Yeah.
I don't pay much attention to Estonia, and it doesn't come up much. So no, there are a lot of people that do. So no.
Yeah, quite a few years ago when we were looking at some corporate structuring stuff, probably in 2019, 2020, Estonia was actually a viable option. Now, again, the offshoring of everything is not really that attractive anymore because it doesn't necessarily provide any meaningful protection the way that everybody thought it did anyways. So now it's more a decision of, and this is my thought on this is like some of these jurisdictions have to be careful because if they bring in regulation and they're not a big enough market, people are going to be like, nah, it's not worth it. Like if all we have to do is avoid servicing Estonia clients, Estonia domiciled users, and if their regulation is not, fairly aligned with what we're seeing in other jurisdictions, where people are just going to say, nah. Like the U.S. has a lot of leverage because the U.S. is a financial powerhouse, right?
Yeah, do we know that? Do we know? I don't personally, so this is what I'm asking you. Like, how much did they raise their? Like, what kind of changes? Are they just on par now with everybody else, or is it some crazy thing that these people have to adhere to?
Yeah, I don't have the fine details of this. I don't believe the fine details were in the article either. It was just talking about, more strict AML requirements.
Probably.
So there's a few.
Where else?
Yeah, there's a few ways to look at this. I mean, in order to facilitate AML meaningfully, the like basic level that we do now is sanctioned wallets, OFAC sanctioned jurisdictions. Just make sure that any wallets that have been red flagged can't participate in your protocols. Any wallets that have interacted with mixers and all this other stuff that have been red flagged for potential AML, they can't participate in your protocols. Most of us have that on protocols. But in order to do AML properly, you have to KYC. You have to have the identity of your client. And you have to, be able to reproduce said identity if subpoenaed by regulators. And so there's a lot of technology being developed to provide KYC and AML compliance without each protocol having to maintain that very personal data set, which is which is part of the reason people don't want to KYC currently, is they don't want to provide some company incorporated in Estonia with anonymous founders with their personal information.
Right. This is all DeFi. Like, who are you giving my information to, right?
well, yeah, like some people don't want to have their KYC because they're trying not to pay taxes. I think that's a thing of the past. Like the tax authorities now have very sophisticated technology. Like, I mean, they can find you for sure. They can figure out what you're doing. So that to me isn't the same draw. What is important to me as a user, if I'm going to KYC somewhere, I need to trust that institution has proper data security so that my information isn't going to get leaked.
Correct.
Which even large institutions, I think Facebook had a huge data breach. There's so many major multinational corporations that have had these data breaches. I think that's what people are really thinking about with respect to AML and KYC. At least most of the people, most of the people that I know aren't super concerned about KYC. The days of like, hey, we're not going to pay tax on this. Well, I mean, I never really thought that was ever an option, but the days of that being viable as an option are pretty much gone. So now it's just really, I think it's really just, privacy and data sovereignty and so on. Anyways, at the same time, we were talking about CBDCs and different things and Bitcoin maybe being a potential means of exchange. We talked a little bit, I think yesterday, Kiara and I, about how, or maybe it was might have been on Monday. I can't remember. We talked one day this week about Binance freezing Bitcoin withdrawals. Or was that you and I?
No.
We talked. Okay. Anyways, we talked about it earlier this week about Binance freezing Bitcoin withdrawals because of this crazy congestion because of the BRC20 tokens being issued and a lot of transactions and a lot of stuff happening that's congesting the Bitcoin network and was making transaction costs insanely high, and the likeliness of transactions failing also extremely high. So what we're seeing now is African countries are saying, whoa, wait a second. Because the fees of Bitcoin soar and it's pretty inefficient, like most of these people are making microtransactions. So especially in African nations, right? Like they're not making hundreds of thousands of dollars in transactions a day so that the $10 or $15 or $20 fee of Bitcoin transfer is absorbable. They're moving $5, $3, $1, and if the fees are 25, obviously that's not a viable solution. So instead of all of them saying, forget Bitcoin, we're going to do CBDCs immediately. It's interesting. They're exploring the use of stable coins, which could be a more accessible and alternative option for people to use every day for transactions. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I've been in that position where I'm trying to make a trade and all of a sudden it's going to cost me $180 to make a trade. But yeah, so I think, I mean, that was quite a while ago now, but like you were saying, if you're trying to do something for $10 and it's costing you $3, that's a big deal, right? So I think it's really important. And I mean, there's a reason why the projects that I'm involved with now don't run on Bitcoin. It's not because I'm an anti-Bitcoin. Bitcoin's amazing and it's the beginning of all of it. But I mean, we got to find better ways to do it. And especially in these emerging countries where, especially for everybody, but for them, it's like a non-option. So I think it's great. They're talking about it. That's twice today. Africa's come out with great thoughts.
Yeah. A couple times, South Africa first, and now just other African countries. I mean, we've kind of been saying this for a while. There's some really interesting technology being developed on the Lightning Network because Bitcoin has some unique attributes. It is by far the most decentralized and probably
this is only battleground. This is how you get from A to B, right? Like they had this main central idea. They got to somehow move it over. So it's going to happen. There's going to be this weird point in the middle. It's not that Bitcoin is lost or it's invaluable or not valuable. It's just they got to get.
I mean, as an economic security. Wait, that's probably the wrong.
No, you can't say that, right?
You can't say that word. But as from a security perspective, not securities, but security perspective, Bitcoin is also by far the most protected of blockchains by economic value, right? Mm-hmm. It's over $1 trillion. It's not over $1 trillion. I don't know what it's at today. Today's maybe not a great day to look at the market cap of Bitcoin. Half a $1 trillion, 526 million and change. Nonetheless, I mean, that's a lot more economic security than most other networks. I mean, ETH is getting up there, of course, in terms of economic security, but it's surely not decentralized to the same extent that Bitcoin is. And there is somewhat of a way to censor and control Ethereum just based on people know who the main participants are in the foundation and so on. Bitcoin doesn't exist. There is no Bitcoin Foundation. There is no there is Satoshi, but no one knows who the hell it is. I still think it's Elon Musk, but we'll see. With no actual backing of that claim, so don't hold me to that. But Enrique, if you're still watching, you can quote me on that one. I think Musk is Satoshi. Kind of hilarious. I don't actually think he's Satoshi, but that'd be really cool because I'm a huge Musk fan. Anyways, okay, coming back now to the US a little bit. We've talked a lot about transactions and CBDCs and some of the global impacts of that. There's some proposed SEC custody rules that people are starting to opine on quite negatively. And so essentially the custody rules, they're looking like if these custody rules were to come into play, it would in effect stifle entirely innovation in the US. I don't think this is actually going to come into play. I think there's going to be bills that are going to come out of the House and the Senate that are going to supersede this and give the SEC different directives, hopefully. If this comes this way, though, most small entities can't participate. Custody is a very compliance-intensive, overhead-intensive activity. And so one of two things has to happen. You have to build a massive department to legally do custody under the SEC jurisdiction, a massive department with, very high-paid experts with high levels of experience to be able to achieve that, or you can outsource to third parties who will lend you their custody services, who will be a vendor for custody for you. But it's very expensive. Now, since you operate or are close to operating a protocol, without getting into the legalities of custody, what are your thoughts on this? Like, and would your protocol be viable if you had to add, 5 or 6 full-time salaries at minimum, plus a massive legal bill every month, quarter, and year for compliance? what would happen? What would happen to your protocol? Would you launch it?
Well, here's the deal. I'm launching a protocol, and we are not launching into the US. We are not available to the US because of everything that we've talked about today. And I'm out there on record now saying it. We have to do everything we can to be compliant. And compliance in the US currently means that you don't get to participate because rules, not just like this, but all of the rules they have in play make it impossible for, and like, for lack of a better word, currently, it really sucks because it does give opportunity for people to start to learn, to start to participate in smaller but meaningful ways. When we can come out here and say, look, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are all the things we follow. The thing about custody is, like, most of it is done, like, I have a really hard time because, to say, would you participate? If we were allowed to, we wouldn't be able to afford to. So the only way that you could do that is by charging way higher fees, which is not great for anybody, right?
Well, the fees would have to be exorbitantly high.
That's what I mean. It's not even like raise the fees a little bit to become compliant. It would pretty much put you out of business. So, and we're just a small company currently.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Somehow we managed to talk for a long time without getting through. You have a lot of opinions. It's great. So one other final thing, we talked a little bit about Jump Crypto coming out yesterday, and as a market maker and a very active participant in the crypto space, saying, hey, we're definitely going to have to start pulling back our US operations because there is so much speculation right now and so much uncertainty about how this is going to impact every area of US operations in blockchain. Now, today, one of the other industry titans, so to speak, market maker Jane Street, who is, again, another big participant that keeps the crypto space firing on all cylinders in the US, is saying, with all of this uncertainty, we might not be able, and this is kind of coming on the back of the custody rules and some of these other things. Yeah. They're just saying, even a large entity like Jump is a multi-billion-dollar a year company. So is Jane Street, probably larger than Jump. I don't know for sure. But even these guys are saying, hey, like, we have the capacity to pay for this stuff, but the uncertainty and the risk is still not, it's still too big relative. It makes it a negative EV opportunity for them. So, I mean, if that's not a testament to how hard it would be for the small guy, that even the big guys are saying, nah, it's not worth it. We're gonna bow out. This is a big problem. To me, the reason I wanted to bring this up today is this is a huge problem for the space. I mean, if we limit liquidity even further from where it is right now, that's a huge problem. It's some of these large institutions that are even like creating the volumes that we're seeing to make this viable. And if they're going to retreat, I mean, regulators and policymakers better take a serious look and quick in the US, because this is, I think, the beginning of, to use a phrase, a slippery slope. Where are you at on this one?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to go where they're allowed to be. And I think that there's again, my uneducated opinion, but they'll be gone until, well, either forever and innovation will just happen elsewhere, or until the US finally gets its head on and is like, okay, so in order to play and be productive and keep this money here. I mean, I was looking into Portugal years ago. There's a reason that those places attract innovation by making it easier for people. And easier doesn't mean like slip under the wire, don't do your due diligence, don't have some sort of structure. It means we need to get in place a system that works, that holds people accountable, but also allows people to be innovative. And until we have that balance, I mean, there's too much at risk. Why would they put their companies at risk? So they'll just leave. And then if they can come back once the US has it figured out, great. But I mean, if I was in their position, well, I'd be doing the same thing. Why would you risk that? Right? What we've seen over the past year with crackdowns on everybody, like, what, you wouldn't put yourself in that position.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, one of the biggest criticisms of traditional finance has been the barrier to access is way too high. Mm-hmm. The counter criticism of crypto now is the barrier to access is way too low.
Right.
that a lot of the scams and the crap and the fraud is allowed in because it's too simple to do so. The cost of doing so is so low that it's easy for scammers to come in. We need to find something in the middle that doesn't stifle innovation, that makes it viable for people to, launch protocols and be innovative in these jurisdictions. So anyways, very exciting. Christine, it's been a blast. As always, thank you a ton for very last second jumping in with zero context and having a good conversation on this. So for everybody who's watching, if you want to see more of Christine, which I'm sure we'll have her back in the future, like, share, subscribe, do all that shit. Add us on Twitter, bookmark the videos. It helps with distribution and so on. We're trying to make the space a more understandable place for people to navigate between the FUD and the FOMO and stay somewhere even keel. Today, I say to you, Christine, go FUD yourself.